Deep beneath miles of water, crushing pressure, and total darkness, there are millions of species we've never seen. Some mountains, forests, and islands are so remote or protected that humans haven't set foot there, and we may never know what lives inside. From underwater labyrinths to dangerous mountains and jungles, the world still has corners so extreme that exploration feels almost impossible. These are places on Earth we still haven't explored. The Abyssal Plains cover about 40% of the ocean floor, sitting deeper than 2,000 meters below the surface. These are genuinely the flattest places on Earth. Down there it's pitch black, no sunlight at all, the temperature is close to freezing, and the pressure is literally 1,000 times what you'd feel standing on a beach. You'd think nothing could live down there, but scientists have found thousands of tiny creatures. Everything from microscopic bacteria to weird little critters crawling around, with over 80% of them being completely new to science. But most of these areas still haven't been explored. It's just so vast, and sending submersibles down there is expensive and dangerous. And there's another problem. We're racing toward knowing less about these places, not more. The International Seabed Authority has granted over 30 exploration contracts for deep sea minerals, including these nodules, small rocks rich in manganese, nickel, cobalt, and copper that companies want to harvest. In 1978, a mining track was made way deep down in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, and when scientists returned 26 years later in 2004, the sediment still hadn't recovered. So removing these nodules could cause a large chunk of these species to die out. We could destroy entire ecosystems down there before we even get to document what lives there. Most people know about the Mariana Trench, but the Kermadec Trench off New Zealand is just as extreme and way less explored. It stretches about 1,000 kilometers from a long line of underwater volcanoes called the Louisville Seamount Chain down toward the northeastern coast of New Zealand's North Island, and it's over 10,000 meters deep. That's deeper than any mountain is tall. In 2022, the Chinese submersible Striver made 16 dives between 5,700 and 10,000 meters, and what they saw was straight up alien. One anglerfish was swimming upside down, a glowing lure hanging below it. Only the second ever seen like that. Then there were these sea cucumbers, tiny, delicate versions, 3 times smaller than the ones in the Mariana Trench. Every trench is basically its own lab of evolution. Different currents and food sources and sediments create these isolated ecosystems where life just evolves in totally unique ways. And it's so vast that most of it is still a mystery. Antarctica looks like one giant frozen block of wasteland, but underneath all that ice is a hidden world of liquid water trapped for thousands, maybe even millions of years. Scientists have found over 600 of these subglacial lakes, and more than 230 of them are active, meaning they fill and drain in cycles that we're still trying to understand. And the biggest one, Lake Vostok, sits under about 4,000 meters of ice, about 500 meters below sea level, and is completely isolated. It's basically a natural time capsule. When researchers drilled through the ice, they found tiny living things in the water, mostly bacteria, but also some simple organisms, including ones similar to what you'd find in fish guts. But this isn't just about ancient microbes. These lakes act kind of like lubricants under the ice sheet, controlling how fast glaciers slide into the ocean. So understanding them is important if we want to predict sea level changes. Drilling down to sample these lakes is insanely tricky though. You had to go through miles of ice without contaminating the water below, because that would just ruin the entire experiment. But it's worth it. There's a hidden alien world down there that's still almost entirely unexplored. Under the jungles of Mexico's Yucatán Peninsula, there's this massive maze of underwater caves. You get into them through cenotes, which are these round sinkholes that look like natural swimming holes. The biggest system we know of, called Sistema Sakak'tun, runs over 230 miles, and that's just what we've mapped so far. There are probably countless passages still waiting to be found. Exploring these caves is insanely dangerous. Divers sometimes have to squeeze through gaps barely wider than their bodies, and in some spots, they have to take off parts of their gear just to get through. Some tunnels drop more than 300 feet straight down, so they need special breathing equipment and very careful planning to survive. Every new passage discovered depends entirely on a handful of explorers willing to take enormous risks. And by risks, I mean risking their lives. In 2018, explorers finally connected Sistema Sakak'tun with another cave system, Sistema dos Hoyos, making it the longest flooded cave in the world at over 215 miles. It took 14 years of searching to find that link, and the full size of this underwater maze is still unknown. When people think of unexplored places, they usually imagine deserts or oceans, but some of the hardest spots to reach are way up in remote mountains. The Star Mountains in Papua New Guinea stretch about 60 miles, with peaks hitting nearly 4,800 meters, nearly 6 times the height of the tallest building on Earth. They were officially discovered in 1958, but only about 10 people have ever reached the top. These mountains are brutal. They're soaked almost all the time, super humid, and the terrain fights you at pretty much every step. Rain, mud, constant cloud cover make moving through them exhausting and very dangerous, but that same extreme environment has created a crazy amount of life. Scientists have found well over 1,000 species there, and nearly 100 of them you just can't find anywhere else in the world. Every plant and animal there is adapted to the wet, unpredictable environment, but scientists haven't been able to fully study the area, making it one of the most mysterious ecosystems left on Earth. The Amazon is enormous, of course. Vale do Javari is just a section of it, but it's bigger than Austria, and it's completely off limits. The area is home to the most uncontacted tribes in the world, people who have never had contact with the outside world. The Brazilian government has made it illegal for anyone to go there, and that's because even a simple cold or a flu brought in by outsiders could wipe them out. These tribes live completely on their own, and any interference could be catastrophic. And because of that, huge stretches of forest here are still completely unexplored. To anyone who doesn't belong to these tribes, that is. Most of the area's plants and animals are also completely unstudied. This is probably the most famous unexplored place on the planet, North Sentinel Island. It's home to the Sentinelese, one of the last groups of humans who live completely isolated from the modern world. They survive as hunter-gatherers still and have made it very clear they do not want visitors. Anyone who tries gets attacked. The Indian government declared the island and the surrounding waters off limits for very good reason. And it's similar to the last point. If these isolated people happen to catch anything, even a cold, it could be devastating to them. Because of that, nobody really knows what's on the island. We don't know how many people live there, what the plants and animals are like, or what the landscape looks like up close. Everything we see comes from a distance, from boats or helicopters, and even those are limited. It's a place that exists on maps, but we can really only guess as to what's actually happening there. Way out in the South Atlantic, about 2,100 kilometers from the nearest town, there are 2 islands called Gough and Inaccessible. No, that's not a mistake I'm making. There's actually an island so remote, they just named it Inaccessible. Barely any humans and no invasive animals like rats, cats, or goats, things that have wrecked almost every other remote island, have managed to get there. And because of that, these islands are basically time capsules. Inaccessible Island alone has 2 bird species, 8 plants, and at least 10 bugs and other small creatures you just won't find anywhere else on Earth. Scientists can use these islands to see what an ecosystem looks like when humans haven't messed with it, which is rare for anywhere on the planet. Reaching them is not impossible. You can get there by boat, but almost no one does, because it's just a long, rough journey through some of the roughest ocean in the world, and the harbor on Inaccessible Island is only accessible a few days out of the year. Northern Greenland is one of the most hostile places on the planet. Most people will never set foot there. The ice stretches for hundreds of miles in every direction, and the only things moving are the glaciers slowly inching toward the sea. Temperatures can drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius. You can only imagine that with wind. Must make it painful to breathe. Landing a plane or setting up a camp here is basically impossible in most areas. Even researchers using planes and satellites can only get rough measurements, and drilling through all that ice to get a sample is a massive challenge that takes years of planning. But we do know there's stuff under the ice. Scientists using ice-penetrating radar and satellites have found hidden mountains, valleys, and lakes trapped under thousands of feet of it. Some of these subglacial lakes have probably been sealed off for millions of years. I mean, who knows what could be down there? Most people think deserts are just empty, aside from the coarse, rough sand that gets everywhere. But the Namib in southern Africa is rather mysterious. This place stretches over 2,000 kilometers along the coast of Namibia, and some parts are so remote you could drive for days and never see another person. Of course, it's scorching hot during the day, but it drops below freezing at night, and the giant sand dunes are always shifting, making the landscape almost impossible to navigate. Some of the areas haven't been studied properly because it's just too dangerous to get there. There's always a chance you could get caught up in a sandstorm or suffer heat exhaustion, but even in this extreme environment, life has found a way. There are elephants, lions that hunt along the dunes, insects crawl underground, small reptiles hide in the gravel plains, and scientists are still discovering species that barely exist anywhere else on Earth. I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.